in the quiet heart, Kansas. 3 neighbors set out on a summer afternoon in 1988 and were never seen again. Decades later, a simple home repair uncovers something hidden, something that had been waiting for 27 years. What begins as a small discovery quickly unravels into a trail of clues, long-buried secrets, and a mystery that the town thought it had forgotten. Emporia, Kansas, 2015. Bill Walker is swapping porch boards when his chisel knocks on something hollow inside the railing, a small wooden cube with a carved arrow and a tiny hex key stamped WT-37. Bill knows the cube at once. It was from a game his daughter Paige used to play with her friends. Trail dice, little blocks with arrows they hid to mark secret routes. He turns the cube in his palm. The arrows line up in a 3-1-2 sequence. He doesn't realize he's speaking aloud. Water tower first, then bridge, then river. 27 years without answers. A cube forgotten inside a handrail will reopen an entire town. Emporia sits in the middle of the map like a thumbtack on brown cardboard. Summers are bright and loud. Pickups cough up dust, sprinklers hiss, and every porch has a story. In 1988, one story swallowed all the others. 3 teenagers from the same street rode their bikes past the grain silos and didn't come home. People learned to talk around the gap. They kept grilling, kept mowing, kept waving. They stopped asking Bill how he was. Bill never learned how to stop measuring. He measures wire, steps, hours. He keeps a yellow tape clipped to his belt even when he sleeps on the sofa. On good days, he thinks of Paige's laugh, high and sudden, the way she double-knotted her sneakers. On bad days, he replays the last argument, a small thing made of sharper edges, and bargains with air. The cube in his hand isn't a memory. It's new wood, new weight. He sets the key on the rail and calls the one person who won't tell him to let it go. Del Boone, he says when her voice comes through. It's Bill. I found something. Del used to be the undersheriff here. In every old photo, she's in tan uniform, squinting at the sun as if trying to read it. Now she keeps work gloves in her truck and a paper cup of sunflower seeds. She chews when she's thinking. She drives over without asking for details. Del holds the cube like evidence and like a toy. Trail dice, she says, takes me back. She turns it once, twice. 3-1-2. If they made a rule of it, that's a route, not a riddle. Bill nods. Paige loved rules. She said rules keep adventures from turning dumb. Del smiles sideways. Smart kid. And stubborn. She taps the WT on the key. Water Tower 37. Ring a bell. It's the maintenance panel at Simmons Grain. Bill says, I did the lights there once. Before we sprint across town, Del says, there's someone else who should see this. She means Maya Patel, the reporter who turned a job at the Weekly into a podcast people in other time zones know. Maya arrives an hour later, hair in a messy bun, phone in one hand, tiny notepad in the other. She looks at the cube and grins. Analog breadcrumbs. She says, thanks for not giving me another mystery with passwords. Del rolls her eyes. Podcast. She says like it's a misdemeanor. Maya only smiles wider. On the porch steps, the 3 set the cube, the key, and a street map between coffee cups. Bill explains the game. Back then, Paige and her friends cut cubes in shop class and carved arrows with a V-shaped chisel. They hid them in gutters, under mailbox lids, behind loose bricks. The language was simple: north, south, left, right. Sometimes a number meant how many blocks. With chalk marks on curbs and a pocket full of marbles to weigh the cubes down, the kids could turn an ordinary afternoon into a maze. Maya asks questions the way a mechanic taps a wheel. Who else knew the code? Did adults play along? Did you ever find cubes after they vanished? Bill shakes his head. I stopped looking. Del flicks a seed shell into a paper bag. We searched everywhere in '88, she says. But we were listening for shouts, not reading wood. Maybe we walked right past these little things. People always walk past little things, Maya says softly. That's why I have a job. The day rolls on. Heat presses down and then relaxes. Sprinklers tick. Bill's grief narrows into something useful. He tapes a sheet of paper to the table and sketches a route as if lines could steady his hands. 3, he says, tapping the first arrow. The tower. 1, the bridge. 2, the riverbank path. Dell nods. We start where the key fits now. If it's a dead end, we say we tried. If it's not, she doesn't finish. Maya closes her notepad. If it's not, I'll keep the jokes to a minimum and the recorder in my pocket. Promise. She pauses. Metaphorical recorder. Relax, Delaware. They pack light. Flashlights, gloves. A pry bar Del swears would open the moon if you get the angle right. Bill pockets the cube. He doesn't know why he wants to keep it close, only that his palm feels less empty when it's there. As they lock the house, he studies the street like a friend he hasn't seen since they said something unforgivable. The same houses, the same mailboxes, different people, same hole. Driving across town, they pass the places that use to anchor every summer. The dairy barn that still sells cherry ice. The ball field where the loudspeaker gargles out the national anthem like a friendly robot. Quiet air, soft wind. Bill names them in his head like mile markers. Del keeps both hands steady on the wheel. Maya reads road names aloud and circles them as if the town might try to wriggle away. Halfway there, a freight train moans somewhere south, a long iron throw clearing. Bill's knuckles go white on the cube. Del hears it too and says nothing. Maya fills the silence with the voice she uses for intros. 3 kids, she says. One hot evening, one small city with too many places to hide. If the dice point to the tower first, maybe that's where the story started to go wrong. Simmons' grain rises out of flat streets like a ship pulled up on land. The water tower wears peeling paint and a hand-lettered slogan from another school year. Go Spartans. Nearby, the silos throw long shadows. There's a chain-link fence and a service gate with a padlock the size of a baked potato. Del parks by the office, flashes a retired badge that still lives in her wallet, and signs the visitor clipboard with a date that suddenly looks loud on paper. Inside the fence, the air smells like dust and iron. The tower's maintenance hatch sits 10 feet up behind a ladder. A faded stencil says WT 37. Bill pulls the tiny key from his pocket. His fingers aren't shaking now. They're very still, the way they get before you make a cut that matters. Del stands next to him, hands loose, ready to steady the ladder. Maya stays back far enough to watch their faces, close enough to catch a word if one falls. Bill climbs. 10 steps. 11. He fits the key into the lock, breathes, and turns. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the cylinder shifts with the tired grace of old metal. A click travels through the ladder, into Del's hands, into the soles of Maya's shoes, into Bill's bones. The heavy panel begins to inch inward on its hinges. The lock gives way with a tired cough. The panel swings inward, and cool, stale air breathes out like the tower has been holding it since 1988. A narrow ladder waits behind the hatch, damp to the touch. Bill tests the first rung. Del steadies the ladder. Maya angles her flashlight. Flakes of pale paint drift like slow snow. They climb into the belly of the water tower. Sound turns hollow. Each step clanks ahead of them. The air smells of rust and old rain. A short catwalk circles the curved wall. Maintenance closets on the north side. He says, pointing to a door stamped WT 37 service. Its seam is sealed with paint and a row of fat screws. Del works her pry bar. If this door could talk, it would lawyer up, she mutters, levering one screw, then another. Maya holds a light, mouth a tight line that still almost smiles. The door sighs open. Inside, room no bigger than a pantry, and 3 bicycles standing in a perfect row. Not collapsed, not dusty. Tires aired, chains oiled, frames polished. A red one with a rear reflector missing. A blue one with tape around the seat. a black one with thin white pinstripes. All 3 petals are aligned, right arms pointing down at the same angle, like soldiers at ease. Bill stops in the doorway. The ache moves through him like a slow wave. Paige's seat, he says to the blue bike. The tape was his fix that became permanent because she liked the look. Gloves, Dell says softly. They pull on nitro. Document, then we call it in. But I want to see one thing first. On each seat post, a small wooden cube is tied with wire. The wood is clean, the arrows cut deep. Dell loosens a twist just enough to turn the first cube. Maya reads, left, north, 2 blocks. Bill rotates the next. When they set the 3 side by side on a shelf, the message is plain. Together the arrows point bridge. Bill explains the code without taking his eyes off the cubes. In their game, an arrow wasn't just direction. A number beside it meant blocks, a nick on the top meant use an alley, and 2 nicks meant service road. The kids built the rules in shop the same way they built the cubes, together, sanding and laughing and arguing about whether north should be the sharp end or the tail. Now, a memorial, Maya says, a breadcrumb. They scan the closet. Smudges and dust mark where hands turned and leaned. A clean semicircle shows where a bucket once stood. On a bracket behind a red bike, Bill finds a wooden tool, a narrow jig with V-groove, the kind used a guy to chisel for repeating the same cut. Burned into one corner is a faint school stamp, $253 US. Shop 2. Under varnish, a pencil name half-faded. Doyle. Dell studies the groove. Coach Doyle taught shop that year, she says, and he was our radio guy. Everyone loved him. He had keys to half the town. She compares the groove to the cube's arrows. Same angle. Dell thumbs the school stamp again, remembering how the shop kept a checkout sheet for specialty tools. Doyle was old school. He burned his name into anything he lent out, proud of neat work and neat kids. If this sat here, she says, someone from the shop brought it. Someone who didn't worry about coming back for it. Bill crouches by the black bike. Along the chain are tiny punch marks, one near the quick link. 2 links later another, then 2 together. Transhabit, he says. He marked chains like other kids marked notebooks. He swallows. These are their bikes. The tower hums as wind noses the vents. Moisture beads on a lamp and falls in slow drops. Rust blooms overhead like islands. If you want to hide something in plain sight, Maya says, you'd pick the one landmark everyone stops seeing. Dell circles once more, hunting what you notice only when hope returns. On the floor under the blue bike, she spots a tiny splash of bright color, an orange baked into old dust. She lifts a crumb with a swab. Safety orange, she says. Looks like equipment paint. Kincaid Hauling uses that exact cone orange, Maya replies. Their yard practically glows. Maya squints at the orange fleck. Not just any orange, she adds. Kincaid paints their bumpers and toolboxes with safety enamel that dries glossy even on rough steel. You can spot their trucks from 2 blocks away. Same pop. Dell doesn't bite. She's staring at the neatness. The scrub chains, the aligned pedals. Someone took time. Someone made order, not a call. They take quick photos, measure out a habit. Seat post height, pedal clearance, the size of the wire twist, as if numbers could anchor the moment. Dell notes time on a scrap from her seed bag and leaves a message with the sheriff. Found property tied to case 88 to 1002. Scene secured. Request evidence tech. Then she pockets the phone. We have minutes before this fills with boots. Let's use them. They carry the cubes to the catwalk where light from the hatch pours in. Side by side, they draw a line that leaves the tower and heads toward the river the way a compass knows north. Bill traces it in the air. From here, the quickest path to the Cottonwood Bridge is 2 east, 1 south, back alleys, or the service road by the silos. Dell says, less traffic. Maya looks through a gap in the metal skin. The town lies plain, rooftops, elms, the slow brown ribbon of the river. Wind pushes warm air in and lifts a curl from her forehead. She shades her eyes and studies the bridge. Who could open this hatch without prying? She asks. Who knew the closet? Who liked things lined up? Maintenance crew. Dell says, me, back then. Doyle, if the stamp is honest. And half the seniors had copies in the 80s. The tower was where kids came to scare each other and kiss outside porch light range. I hauled more than one down from here with a warning and a ride home. She steps to the hatch and looks down at the neighborhood spread out like a flattened board game. Back then, this was the secret clubhouse everyone knew about. She says, a cousin works nights. You borrow his key. A janitor likes you. He looks away. Half the town pretended not to see. Bill stares at his gloves. Paige asked once if she could climb if she wore good shoes, he says. I said no and fix another light on the steps. He breathes. Wasn't enough. We're not rewriting that night, Maya says. We're reading it. They set the cubes back on the seat posts and retie the wire. Dell pulls the closet door mostly shut, but not locked, a promise to return with the right people. They step out to the catwalk again. A freight train moans somewhere south. A long note. Maya freezes. There, she says. South side of the bridge, under the first truss. Sun glances off something small and metallic at the edge of shadow. Flash gone. Flash again when leaves stir. Her grin is quick and certain. I think we have a second step to follow. From up here, the bridge glints like a small, stubborn wink. They descend the ladder into daylight. Outside the fence, the town looks the same as an hour ago. It isn't. The day feels thinner, as if it just learned a secret. Dell starts the truck. Bill keeps the tiny key in his pocket. Maya keeps her eyes on the bridge, even when it ducks behind rooftops. Bridge. Dell says, putting the truck in gear. Bridge, Maya echoes. Bridge. Bill says, and the word feels like direction and decision at once. They reach the Cottonwood Bridge as the sun tilts and the river turns brown-green. Traffic hums above. Below, air cools and smells of damp limestone. Vines clutch the abutments. If you don't know what to look for, you miss it. A slit of shadow where brush parts and a culvert mouth hides, half choked with cattails. Dell kills the engine. Quicken, quick out, she says, lifting the pry bar. Bill takes a flashlight and the cube in his pocket. Maya studies the underside like a stage set. Angles, stains, rust blooming down from bolts. The entrance smells of standing water and iron. Their footsteps go hollow. Light picks out slick algae, white mineral tears. On the concrete, faint tire lines curve like pencil strokes. Narrow, smooth, more cart than car, maintenance dollies or bikes. Condensation beads on the corrugations and slides in slow seams. Mosquitoes spiral where light meets shadow. Someone long ago tagged the wall with smiley face that rust has turned thoughtful. Next to it, a tiny chalk arrow survives in a dry patch, the ghost of a rule from a summer no one wrote down. Used often, Maya says. Old, but steady, Bill answers, kneeling. Out and back. No panic. The tunnel widens, turns. Sound throws back at them a half-second late. Far away, a drip keeps time. The river glints through joint gaps. A thread of wind carries floodplain mud and plants. Dell keeps her beam low. Lou measured in pedal lengths. Bill says he'd leave a signature. Like what? Maya asks. Stones. Gray stones with a stripe, so he could find his way. As if summoned, Maya's beam finds pebbles at the base of the wall, each with a thumb-wide band of faded color. Turquoise, then white, then turquoise. Not random. A patient arrow running along the wall. Dell crouches. The paint flakes under her glove, but holds. In '88 I'd have called this litter, she says. We were listening for shouts. They follow the painted stones to a bend where the culvert becomes a service gallery. Cable trays, rusted clamps, a capped conduit. At the end, a door once red, now brown with rot, swollen from years of wet. Dell sets the bar. The first push gets nothing. The second groans. The third gives. A strip of air knifes out. Solder, old oil, the plasticky bite of adhesives. Inside, a room the size of a pantry. Someone tried to keep it neat, and almost did. The room is cool and close. Paint peels from the ceiling in thin scales. A drain in the corner coughs once and settles. A coffee can of bolts sits by a cracked vise. Someone wrapped the vise handle with electrical tape to save a palm from blisters. A small kindness that has outlived the hand that made it. A workbench hugs one wall, its top a map of fixes. A shallow drawer sticks half open with odd screws. A pegboard holds 2 wrenches and an empty outline of a third. In the corner, a milk crate of broken insulators and half a junction box. Bill plays the light across the bench. "Here," he says. The top bears repeated V-shaped scars. 2 inches long, same angle, clean like they were cut with a guide. He runs a finger in one groove. Same cutter as the cubes. Same hand, Dell adds. Someone who likes repetition. Maya circles, slow. She pauses at a coil of cokes with a crimp connector and at a metal bracket bolted high, shaped like half AT. "Antenna mount," she murmurs, "or a place to hang a trouble light." But that coke says radio. On a hook by the door swings a small metal whistle on a frayed cotton string. The plain silver coach kind. Dell lifts it with a fingertip. A crescent of teeth marks dents the mouthpiece. Doyle chewed his, she says. Wouldn't admit it. Maya kneels by a hardened splash on the floor. It's a glassy puddle the color of amber, feathered at the edges. She wraps it, 2-part adhesive. She says, "Industrial, high bond. Spill it once, keep it forever." Bill turns a faded strip of hazard tape pressed into dust in the crate. The adhesive still shines in the beam. "Kincaid taped everything with this stuff," he says. "Bumpers, toolboxes, valve wheels." Dell takes it in without smiling. Bench with perfect V's. Whistle like Doyle's. Glue a Kincaid yard swims in. A mount for an antenna. "And loose stones," she says. "I don't see ghosts. I see a place." A place they came to, Maya says, or were brought to, safe enough to fix things properly. Bill steadies himself on the bench. He imagines 3 bikes leaned outside, their squeaks quieted, chains wiped clean. Not panic, preparation. He doesn't know if that's kinder or worse. What was this room officially? Maya asks. "Signal service." Dell says, "A text closet. Kids make clubhouses out of spaces like this. If an adult helped, it becomes an outpost." Maya grips the bracket, tests its wobble. Outpost fits. Dell looks at the door, at hinges that gave up after 3 tries. She breathes in, out. "There's something I never wrote down," she says. "Ruby Lane told me she saw a man climbing the water tower that week. Lantern with a blue sleeve, so the light wouldn't carry. I called it campfire talk. Told her to go home." The room goes quiet except for the drip. Neither Maya nor Bill hurries to pause. Dell sets the whistle back on its hook, like it weighs more than it looks. "I didn't want to be the deputy chasing stories from girls with good eyes," she says. "I wanted bolts, locks, times, tires." "We have bolts," Maya says gently. "Grooves and glue. And you." They work. Photos of the bench and bracket, measurements between grooves. Quick sketch of the room. Dust halos their shoes. In the back corner, behind a length of flex conduit tossed like a sleeping snake, something squares its flush to a joist. Maya nudges the conduit aside and squats. It's a wooden cube like the others, cleaner than it should be, as if someone shielded it when they left. It is wire tied to a rusted nail, as if the nail were the last hook in the world. She frees it and turns it in her hand. The arrow is broad and simple and points not to a street, but to a sound. The cut tracks toward the thin hiss of the river. On one face, 2 tiny nicks. Service road. Left for someone who knows what the hiss means. She says, "Lou." Bill breathes. He used the river like a compass when it got dark. Above them, a car crosses a bridge and the span sings a low chord. Beyond that, steady and patient, the river rubs the banks. Maya's smile is small and certain. Last stop of the code, she says, the margin where water and land shake hands. They step back into the gallery. The painted stones wait like polite guides. Air moves. At the culvert mouth, the river throws light up into the leaves, the room behind them briefly flickering, as if someone had switched on a TV. They look that way anyway. It is only water. It looks like a message. River, Del says. River, Bill answers. River, Maya echoes. They step out from the culvert into a hush of light. Late afternoon lays a warm glaze over the riverbank. Weeds glitter with gnats. Cottonwood fluff drifts like slow snow. The cottonwood slides past, brown-green and patient, shouldering at roots. Along the bank, rusted ribs of old iron poke from the dirt. Bits of rail, a bent ladder rung. The square ghost of footing. Sun strikes everything shallow and honest. Del shades her eyes, mapping the ground the way she maps a room. Spread out, she says, feet where you can see them. Bill moves toward the line where gravel meets track. The main iron is bright from years of wheels, but near a joint is flashlight. Kept in his jacket from habit, picks out dull scars. He kneels, palms on his knees, and breathes the warm creosote. Here, he says. Maya joins him. What am I looking at? Bill runs his finger along the head of the rail. Not rust. Heat bluing and a scuff. A stop, not a slide. Big weight came down fast and settled. See the faint fan of grit? That's sand. He points to tan freckles tucked into the ballast. Locomotives lay sand when they need grip. You don't get it by accident. Del crouches. To anyone else, it's just dirty metal and bruised stone. To Bill, it's a story pressed flat. He can feel the moment in his bones. Steel, weight, hiss. Old, he says, but real. Maya's voice turns practical. We can prove the when. She thumbs her phone, then her smile tilts. Better by landline. People respect old mysteries on old phones. She steps away toward an interpretive sign that still has a call box bolted to it, lifts the faded receiver, and dials a number she keeps for odd days. The local museum, then a volunteer who knows the right retired dispatcher to wake at 4 on a Sunday. Names travel. Then wait music crackles like a storm on a distant AM dial. Del and Bill stand quiet by the rail. Water whispers against stones. Above them, the bridge hums when a pickup crosses. The smell is summer and iron and green things baking. Maya cups the receiver. Okay, she says after a minute. We've got a friend of a friend with a basement full of binders. She listens, scribbles on the back of a flyer. Special incident log, date 2 August 1988. Freight 482 eastbound, emergency brake application at mile marker 327.94 obstruction on line. Time stamped 1812. She looks up, eyes bright and soft at once. 1812. Bill stares at the rail like it might answer. He nods once. The kind of nod you give to a fact that hurts and helps at the same time. They were near enough to hear it, he says, or to make it stop. Del lets out the breath she's been holding since the tower. So the line wasn't a rumor, she says. Something forced that train to look. They fan out again. On the riverside, tangled brush hides a rectangle of old steel set into a concrete frame. 2 vertical guides, and between them, a heavy plate like a door. A crank box, locked, sits on one side, a fat chain drooping to an axle. Flood trash, reeds, plastic. A shoe has gathered against the lower lip. Comporta, Bill says by instinct, then in English, sluice gate. Controls flow into this gallery when the river runs high. If our kids used the culvert, they'd learn this rhythm. Del tests the lock with her gloved hand. The keyway is small. Hex. She rolls the tiny key between finger and thumb. WT 37. She has the look she gets when a problem and a tool finally shake hands. "Let's see how far standard goes," she says. The key slides like it knows the house. Bill holds his breath. Dell turns once, twice. The mechanism resists, mutters, then yields. The chain clinks and goes slack. A narrow door, chest height, unlatches with a tired bark. Someone had a system, Maya says behind them. One key for more than one door. They haul the plate up enough to crawl. Cold air pours out, smelling of wet stone and iron. Maya slips in first on hands and knees, then Bill, then Dell sliding the plate back to the safe hold. So they don't end up river soup. Inside, their lights draw a corridor from the dark. Brick, sweating, narrow enough that shoulders brush. The sound changes again, deeper, close. The river now a steady hush through the wall. They move in low. The passage jogs left, then right, then opens into a pocket, an old maintenance cavity, no bigger than a closet, ribbed with steel and lined with peeling paint. A metal cabinet, stout, boxy, waist-high, sits against the back wall on short legs. Its door is fat with rust and hasps. A number plate, tilted, reads M9. Dell whistles once, short and happy. "Coffer," she says. The kind they kept first aid kits and spare parts in so floods wouldn't steal them. She runs her glove over the seam and shows flakes the size of leaves. "When these were common, I still had a perm." Maya leans, listening to the vault the way you listen to a seashell. If there's anything inside, it's waited a long time. They circle the cabinet like divers around a find. Bill tries the handle. Stiff. Dell sets the pry bar's beak under the lower hasp and leans. Metal complains. She doesn't fight it. She coaxes, shifting the angle until the old steel remembers it's supposed to move. The first hasp gives with a bang that echoes down the corridor into deep hush. The second groans, then the third. Bill lays a hand on the door, steadying more than helping. "Ready?" Dell asks. "Ready." Maya answers, voice small in the small space. Bill nods. They open the cabinet. For a breath, they see only dark and a thin drift of dust. Then the beams find shape and color. A metal lunchbox, scuff at the edges, painted with a simple field of blue and a white stripe like a horizon. The handle is cracked black plastic wrapped once in electrical tape. The latch is closed, not locked. Maya almost laughs. "Of course," she says. "The most ordinary thing in a holy place." Bill recognizes the tape job. He has done that exact wrap 100 times to 100 tired handles. His chest tightens and steadies. "Let me," he says. Dell steps back half a foot, giving him the front. "Slow," she says. "We document after." Bill lifts the lunchbox with both hands, as if it were full of water. It is not heavy, but has weight. He sets it on the cabinet lip. His fingers find the latch without looking. He breathes in and hears the tiny bounce of the metal tongue like a memory. He has been working around for half his life. "Before you open," Maya says softly, "remember that whatever's inside has already happened. We're not making it happen." Bill nods once, eyes on the hinge. He pops the latch and tips the lid. Inside, a neatness that knocks him back a step. 3 cloth wristbands looped together with a twist of wire, each with faded county fair logo and a month printed in block numbers. A brass token the size of a quarter with a Ferris wheel stamped on it. A handful of small stones with a stripe of paint, turquoise, white, turquoise, nested in the corner like candy. And coiled on top of all of it like a yellow snake asleep, Bill's tape measure. He knows it as surely as he knows his own handwriting. Dings on the case. The hairline crack near the belt clip. The ink number 22 on the back from a job that paid in sweat and not much else. Page used to take it and pretend it was a microphone, clicking the lock for applause. His knees go soft, but he doesn't fall. The river keeps whispering. Maya doesn't move. Dell's mouth goes tight around something that wants to be a prayer and doesn't know the words. Bill closes his eyes. He lays a finger on the cool metal of the tape, and then on the token, and then on the braided bands. The wire that holds the bands is the kind he kept in coffee cans. The twist is neat. The stones are loose. The token is Trent's. The tape is his, and Paige always stole like a dare, like a hug you get with your hands. They were here, he says, voice thin and sure. He opens his eyes to the small, ordinary treasure nested in blue paint. They were here. Back in town, the day looks ordinary again, but it isn't. Dell pulls into a diner that still smells like coffee burned at 5 a.m. and bacon that never really leaves the walls. They take a corner booth. Bill sets the lunchbox on the vinyl seat beside him like a fourth person. Maya flips open a thin notebook and starts sorting the day into lines. Let's cross what we have, Dell says, tapping a pen against a napkin map. No poetry, just parts. Maya holds up fingers, one by one. Orange enamel on a cube in the tower. V-groove jig stamped $253 US. Shop 2 with Doyle burned in. Hardened puddle of two-part adhesive on the culvert floor. A radio bracket. And a metal whistle with bite marks. She lets her hand fall. Plus 3 kids' bikes oiled and posed like a catalog. Bill's eyes stay on the lunchbox. And the tape, he says. Paige always took it. Dell points to the paint first. Kincaid hauling. Their yard's a sea of that orange. Anything that can rust, they paint. Let's be sure it's not in the old orange, Maya says. 10 minutes later, they stand at the chain-link fence at Kincaid's yard while a forklift beeps past stacks of pallet crates. Toolboxes and bumpers gleam the same slick cone orange that fleck the cube. Maya holds the cube bag up to the afternoon light. The match is not chemistry. It's the way light bounces off a certain gloss, the fine grit embedded in the finish. How it refuses to look dull even when dusty. Dell nods once. Paint's not a conviction, she says, but it's a finger pointing. Next stop, the high school. The shop has the same smell in any decade. Sawdust, oil, a whisper of hot metal. Mr. Naylor, the custodian, knows Dell and Bill and does not ask many questions. In a back cabinet, he digs until his hand comes up with a dog-eared checkout ledger from the 80s. Specialty tools, he says, back when we track with a pen. The last entry for V-Groove Guide, Shop 2, checked out by Doyle, not returned. Date, July 1988. Dell looks at the stamp again in the tower jig and then at the ledger, and her jaw tightens in a way that is not anger yet. He'd burn his name into a cloud, she says. Of course he branded the jig. Maya photographs the ledger and the cabinet label and the empty hook where a V-guide should hang. She holds up the whistle they found. Sealed now in an evidence bag. Naylor squints at it. Coach chewed his, he says. Kids made fun of the dents. Bill touches the bag, then pulls his hand back. The crescent marks are so human, they feel rude to stare at. They add the glue. At a hardware supplier on Commercial Street, Dell asks the oldest employee for that two-part syrup the haulers loved in the 80s. He laughs. Oh, the boat repair stuff? Kincaid bought it like candy. Sticks to wet steel. Cures hard in the cold. Good for patching anything you don't want to see again. He pulls a dusty brochure from a drawer. The color photo of a hardened amber puddle looks exactly like the floor in the culvert. No lab needed, just memory and a salesman who never throws paper away. Dell lines the facts up on the diner napkin when they circle back for coffee that tastes like an apology reheated 4 times. Orange enamel points Kincaid, she says, tapping, V-jig, and the brand and the wood point to Doyle and this school. The glue points to Kincaid's habits. The whistle points to Doyle's mouth. The bracket points to radio. The bikes point to care, not chaos. Put the arrows together. 2 adults, one with keys and kids. One with trucks and reasons to be at the silos. Bill stares at the row of dots she has made, then at the lunchbox. Doyle liked being a helper, he says, the trusted one. And Kincaid liked being where the shipments were. Maya says, the silos aren't just grain if someone turns the lights off for 10 minutes. Dell drums the pen once and stops. We talk to Doyle. They find him at the community center gym, the kind of evening where he alternates between telling a kid to square his shoulders and unsnarling a basketball net. He's older, heavier around the middle. His hair's snow white where a cap doesn't cover it. The whistle still hangs on a cotton string. He chews it without thinking. "Coach Doyle," Dell says. He turns, and in the split second between recognition and smile, he looks like a man surprised by a test he forgot to study for. "Dell," he says. "Bill. Maya Patel from the radio thing." He rattles off his knowledge of people like a man who never stopped cataloging. "You all look official. Should I get my good chalk?" "In the office," Dell says. The office reeks pleasantly of pine cleaner and old leather. Trophies crowd a shelf, all plastic metal and brittle pride. Dell closes the door. Maya leans against a file cabinet the way only a person very sure of herself leans. Bill stays standing, arms loose, hands empty. Dell sets the evidence photos down in a neat fan. The jig with a burned name, the closet with the bikes, the whistle with dents, the amber glue, the orange fleck, the bracket. "I'll start simple," she says. "We found the missing jig with your name burned in the water tower closet. We found your habit in the metal of this whistle. We found Kincaid's favorite orange in the same space. We found a radio mount in a room kids could only reach if someone showed them the way. Tell me a story that makes sense." Doyle's smile loosens. He tries humor first. "If you find my missing hammer while you're at it, bring it home." No one laughs. He looks at the whistle bag, then at the jig photo. He sits. "I help kids," he says finally. "That's what I did. They wanted a clubhouse away from porches. I showed them the tower because everybody showed everybody that tower. I brought the jig because those cubes were a mess and I wanted them to quit slicing their thumbs off. I chewed my whistle because I hate waiting. None of this makes me a villain. None of it makes you upset," Maya says. Doyle rubs his face. His hands are clean, but the nails are stained the way as shop teachers get after decades. Shadow crescents that don't wash out. "That night," he says, and the room seems to settle around the words, "I took them up to show them how a mast ties in. They liked the view. Paige said the wind up there makes you feel like a letter being mailed." Bill swallows. They saw a truck down by the silos. Doyle goes on. "Boxes went from a boxcar to a pickup that didn't wear the right logo. I knew Kincaid's paint the way you know your own barn. I knew who worked nights. I knew who was supposed to sign for what. This wasn't that." He looks up at Dell, his eyes finally choosing honesty because the floor is out of other choices. "I panicked." "Define panic," Dell says. Her voice is dry, not cruel. "I told them to get off the tower and go the long way," he says, "through the culvert. I hid the bikes in the closet because if a deputy saw them at the base at the wrong time, we'd have patrol cars and parents in trouble and kids who saw something they couldn't unsee standing where the wrong men could find them. I straightened the pedals because that's what I do when I'm trying to make sense. I was buying minutes. I thought I could go down, smooth feathers, tell a man I knew he'd done wrong without making him prove he knew how to scare me." "And the glue?" Maya asks. "And the orange?" "I borrowed glue from Kincaid when shop budgets got thin," Doyle says, voice smaller. "We all did. They kept a pallet of the stuff in their yard. And the paint. Everybody in this town has that orange on something. A mower, a toolbox. It doesn't prove, it just points. It points the way our kids pointed," Bill says quietly. "To the bridge, to the river." Doyle stares at his hands. "I heard the brakes," he says, barely above a whisper. 6:12. You don't forget that sound when you're halfway up a ladder and your heart is in your mouth. He rubs the heel of his palm over his chest like it still hurts there. "I thought the trouble stopped right then. I thought a stop meant safety. Why didn't you call it in?" Dell asks, and it isn't an accusation, just a line in a ledger she has to fill. "Because I didn't want to explain to 3 families that I was the adult who made kids feel like a secret. he says. Because I thought if I kept my mouth shut and tucked the loose shirts in, the wind would blow this past us. He looks at Bill. I told him to run because I thought running would be a bridge, not a cliff. I thought I could fix it. I hid the bikes, so no one would know where to look first. No one did, Bill says, and the room goes silent again. And Kincaid? Maya asks after a beat. Say his name. Doyle takes a long time. Red was never shy about money, he says. I don't know what he moved that night. I know he knew how to move things. That's all. Dell stands. That's not all, but it's enough to move forward. She gathers the photos and slips them back into the folder. This doesn't end in your office, Doyle. It ends where paper says it ends. Outside, the sky is a dull gold. Bill walks like a man who has carried a weight for a long time and shifted it to the other shoulder. Maya is already in motion, phone to her ear, then in her bag for a notebook, then at the library door before Dell has a truck in gear. How do you find a minute that happened years ago? Bill asks. You look for the invoice it left behind. Maya says. They park at the county annex and descend into the cool basement, where records live in boxes that outlast the people who fill them. The clerk on duty knows Dell and does not bother with forms. What flavor of old pain? She asks. Madison Clinic. Maya says, August 1988. Walk-ins. Night shift. Cash receipts. In a gray box that smells like cardboard and faint lemon cleaner, they find ledger books with careful blue lines and neat names. Maya runs a finger down columns until a line stops her. Here, she whispers. Date, August 2nd, 88. Time, 1905. Description, 3 minors, no identification. Payment, cash. Payer signature, A. Rainey. Bill's breath catches in his throat. Dell closes her eyes once. The quick blink of a prayer finally finding its words. Maya looks up, voice barely more than air. The receipt is signed, she says, by Alton Rainey. The name Alton Rainey changes everything. It changes the way the river sounds in Bill's head, the way the tower looks in Dell's memory, the way Maya stacks pages on the table. Until now, the story bent toward the obvious villains and the charming adult who swore he only helped, with one neat signature in a clinic ledger. The line arcs toward the quiet man people called odd because they never stopped long enough to listen. They stand in the records room a minute longer, letting the air settle around the discovery. Then Dell folds the photocopy and tucks it into the folder like it's a small living thing that hates drafts. Let's rebuild it, Maya says. No speeches. What the parts can prove. Dell nods. What the parts can prove. The reconstruction is careful because it has to be. No one recorded voices. No one wrote letters. What they have are objects and timings. 3 bikes aligned in a tower closet. V-cut marks made with shop jig, orange enamel that lives on Kincaid's equipment. Hardened glue in a culvert. A whistle with teeth. A clinic receipt stamped 1905 and signed A. Rainey. And a freight that threw sand at 1812 because someone or something made it stop. So we start where sound becomes fact. 6:12 p.m., August 2nd, 1988. The eastbound freight hits its brakes and the big weight settles. Bill's trained I read those scars today. Up on the tower, Coach Doyle hears a long metal moan and feels his heart hop. 3 kids and 1 scared adult climb down. He hides the bikes the way a man straightens papers on a messy desk. He tells the kids to take the long way through the culvert, because the short way is full of men with reasons to be angry if anyone saw what wasn't supposed to be seen. Down below, in the cool draft of the gallery, the kids run the way smart kids run. Not wild, not loud, in order. The painted stones, the arrow cubes, the rules they invented to keep adventurers from turning dumb. Those rules hold under fear. They follow the hiss of the river. At the mouth of the culvert, they meet Alton Rainey. We can't put words in his mouth, but we can put behavior on his hands. The man kept odd hours and keys. He liked small lights with shades, so the beam didn't carry. He moved like a person who has spent years not being the loudest in any room. What he sees are three children who know a secret that could hurt grown men with trucks. He has two choices: call someone who will treat the kids like a problem, or be the grown-up they don't have yet. The evidence says he chooses the second. He opens a small sluice door the way Dell did, with a key that shouldn't fit everything and does. He leads them through the narrow corridor to the maintenance pocket. That room with the bench and the bracket isn't a hideout tonight. It's a staging area. He sits them on the steel, finds a first aid kit inside the cabinet, and does what any man who has patched knuckles and scraped knees 1,000 times knows how to do. He uses the good adhesive on a cracked heel, tape on a palm, water in small sips. He gives them a minute to stop shaking. Then he thinks like a railroad guard. If the eastbound stopped at 1812 for debris, there will be a tension on the line. He needs a window off the line and a way to move them without parading them past the men who are counting boxes. The clinic in Madison is small, quiet, paid cash. No questions if you look like you worked a double shift and smell like oil and river. At 19:05, a line in a ledger says 3 minors, no identification, paid by A. Rainey. That's not story. That's ink. After the clinic, Rainey buys time. Maybe he walks them along the service road with the river on their right. Maybe he borrows a pickup that squeaks the way the yard trucks squeak. He knows where trains crawl. He knows where a crew will slow for a signal, just long enough for 4 shadows to become 3, and then none at all. He knows a brakeman who will look at a man with a blue-shaded lantern and decide not to see the rest. We don't need to picture the exact car. We only need to know they go south, away from men with orange paint and from a teacher who can't decide which truth to love. They leave a lunchbox behind, neatly packed with wristbands and a token and painted stones and a yellow tape that is not a microphone today. It is a message to a father who measures the world when he can't fix it. We were here. We planned. We ran because we had to. Follow if you're ready. Does Doyle know this version? Maya asks. He'll know it now. Dell says. They bring the paper to him. He sits behind his desk the way a man sits inside a fence he built. Dell lays a copy of the receipt between the photos from the tower and the culvert. Doyle doesn't touch anything. He reads his own small cowardice in the space between lines. I didn't call Alton, he says. I swear I didn't. The words come out like he's testing, whether air still holds him up. But if the kids reached him, he was the one who would not panic worse than me. You hid the bikes, Dell says. You send them underground. You went down to the yard to smooth feathers. He nods. Red Kincaid was there, he says, as if the name isn't obvious by now. He had that enamel on his fingers. He laughed when he's nervous, and he was laughing. Did you move boxes? Maya asks. No, it's almost angry. I told him that wasn't inventory on the pickup. He told me to mind my business and stop playing hero. Doyle stares at the whistle on the desk, at the crescent of his own tooth on its metal. I told myself there are kinds of help that are worse than none. And then you said nothing for 27 years. Bill says. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Doyle's eyes shine the way eyes do when a person lets go of a version of himself he was trying to keep. I made a child into a secret, he says. I will answer for that. Dell's shoulders lose a fraction of their set. She finally says what she came to say since the tower. Alton did what we should have done. He took them somewhere safe, then got them out of reach. We treated him like a shadow with keys. He was a lock between them and the worst of this town. Rainey died in 91, Maya adds. Hart, he went without telling anyone because he thought the telling would undo the doing. Silence sits with them. Some silences are shame. This one is a kind of respect. Maya closes her notebook. We can publish this, she says, with care. We can say who moved what, who hid what, and who helped. We can say what the paper proves and what the rails remember. We can leave the kids' next steps where they belong, open. Bill takes the lunchbox home. Night drifts onto the street like someone closing a soft door. The porch boards are new where he replaced them. The old railing with the secret is still sturdy. He sits with the lunchbox open beside him and his fingers on the tape measure page used to steal. He pulls out a few inches and lets the spring whisper back in. Out, in. The smallest movement in a long day. Dell joins him with 2 waters and a paper bag of sunflower seeds she'll never finish. She doesn't talk. Neither does he. The river is too far to hear, but he imagines it anyway. When I write this, Maya had said as she left him at the curb, I'll put the weight where it belongs. Not on 3 kids who were clever enough to leave arrows. Not on a man who loved rules. Not entirely on a man who moved boxes. I'll put it on fear and on people who think their quiet is kindness. On the porch, Dell finally breaks the quiet. How long does regret measure? She asks, not as a riddle but as a friend who knows he will answer. Bill looks at the bright numbers on the tape, at the scuffs he could find in the dark. He smiles, and it is small, but it is real. 27 years, he says, and a few millimeters less today. He nests the tape back in the lunchbox among the wristbands and stones, and the Ferris wheel token that was a currency once for 3 kids buying time. He closes the lid and leaves the latch open, a promise and an invitation. Somewhere to the south there are highways and towns where 3 teenagers became 3 different people with new names, then maybe 2, then maybe 1, then lives that kept going because lives are stubborn like that. The camera rests on the lunchbox, on the chip blue paint, and the strip of white like a horizon line. Then the frame tightens on the metal curve of the yellow tape, on the inch marks where a father learned you can't measure what you didn't hold, but you can measure what people leave so you can find them.